which was right near the anchorage, and you could swim over there and swim over the coral heads. Can you still hear me in the back?
Yeah.
Okay. And this couple from Tonga, we went with Molly's geography teacher? Civics teacher, who taught at school in Samoa, and he knew people down here, so we went with them, and he introduced us to this couple, and so they had us there for a Tongan feast, and they had the beautiful pandanus mats on the floor, and so we did that, and then we went to, this is the typical spray paint photograph, and we got a friend of ours took pictures of us in the anchorage in Tonga, and that's where just about all our good undersail pictures are. And that's Hudson steering somewhere. And that's me steering somewhere, and the boys. We spent a lot of time reading on board. We had Calvert School, and they didn't like to do it at sea, so when we'd land, they'd work really hard for a couple hours every day and keep up with their lessons. And that's Gary working on his Calvert School and the Hardy Boy books over his head. Kids could have anything they want on board as long as it fit into their space. The boys were in the forepeak. Molly had a bunk in the main cabin. They did too until they got too long and they wouldn't fit. That's the main cabin. The boys were in the bunk that's outboard of me and behind this bookcase, but we used that for sail storage. And then, of course, Leon had to get his tidbits. And we went from Fiji to Australia. And we went into Brisbane. And instead of going all the way up to the city, we went into a little by creek and tied up here to this little marina. And Molly was working in a sandwich shop in Brisbane. And Gary was apprenticed to a leather maker. And so they'd ride the train into Brisbane every day. Molly's 15 and Gary's 13 or something like that. And Hudson was working cleaning up in the garage nearby. And then we did go down in downtown Brisbane and anchored off the Botanical Gardens. Oops. Oh, that went backwards. So I wonder what I did. But we did see kangaroos and we did see koala bears, but I don't have a picture of the koala bear. And we did row. You can see the boys rowing out of the river in Brisbane. And then we went inside the barrier reef. That's Hope Island, and that's a prawn fisherman, a Australian shrimp boat. And while we were there, we met on the river we were on a man who had sailed on the Joseph Conrad as a cadet. And he was just thrilled to meet us, and we were thrilled to meet him. And we went to Cooktown, of course, and saw the monument to James Cook. And then we went up and found an island inside the reef that had fresh water. So we did laundry, of course. And we were not the first ones to land here. The HMS Dart had come through in 1899 when they surveyed the barrier reef. And Hudson found a message in a bottle at the high tide.
Nice.
And he wrote, there was 10 cigarettes, which were kind of soggy, and a letter. So he wrote to the address on a letter, and we got a reply. It was a Swiss baker on a freighter that had been through about 8 months or so before. And that was fun. So here's Australia, and then we went to Bali, which is in the Indonesian peninsula, and then across to Mauritius, and then to Cape Town. Okay, so here we go. By now we have catheads on the bow to hold the anchors. And we caught some fish. We never caught a thing in the Atlantic, not a thing. We got in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, and we'd trail lines until we caught one fish, and then we'd pull the lines in, because what are you going to do with it when you don't have any refrigeration? We put a new deck on in Australia because George never could stand the fiberglass deck. And we put it on. We had a big debate, and he was keeping tally of who was for fiberglass and who was for wood deck on the side of the boat. And Major Smith said, those old guys would have made it out of fiberglass if they had it. So we put a fiberglass deck on, but we put this over it, and it was fine. But it was a pain in the neck to put on. We got to Bali, and as we approached, we were surrounded by these little fishing boats. And they just were coming in just as we were, and they'd say, you know, we had to kind of snake in. It wasn't a clear channel, and they'd motion to the left. And then they'd motion us to the right. And we got in and anchored. And we fit right in with the turtle sloops. That's us aft, and then the turtle sloops. And those turtle sloops, some of them would come in with 150 turtles. And there's George bartering for T-shirts for tortoiseshell combs or whatever. And we got a dugout canoe. That's Gary and Hudson. And that's our bedraggled dinghy in the foreground. We left without a dinghy because we had the dinghy from the Sunbeam, but we couldn't fit it on board. So Bob Drake and his kids took it in Kismet and sold it. And when we were in the Azores, he built this other little boat. And Bali is a land of rice terraces and elaborate, that's a cremation ceremony on the right. And beautiful temples, carvings everywhere, and monkeys.
Which is which?
They're both friends. And then we went off again across the Indian Ocean, which was very rough. We wanted to go into Keel and Cocos, but there was no way in that gale to get in through a little tiny, cut in the barrier reef. So we went on to Mauritius, but we were sewing sails and fixing things and sometimes it was nice. That was a birthday celebration on the right. Usually we just had simple meals. And
that's Mom on the left.
Yes. I won't say in my, oops, okay, we're back in Noank. The problem is that George capsized the boat, and the dinghy and the camera in Bali. So we're back in Noank from Bali. I have some of Gary's prints, but I haven't digitized those negatives, so they're a pain. But this is coming back into Noank. We look kind of bedraggled. And John Sutphin greeted us in Pan, his yellow lobster boat. And then we tied up. Okay. And we're home. And there's the whole trip. 41 ports, 18 countries, 10 months of actual sailing. 5 years time, and that's what the kids looked like when we got back, and 2 of them are over there with the way they look now. I can maybe answer questions. Let me get my crib sheet first. I had all this information down as far as board feet of lumber and, times between ports and all that, but maybe you're not interested. Anyway, I do want to read this part because I couldn't remember it all. We had expertise and advice from Jack Wilbur, Major Smith, Fred Cousins in particular. And also we got a sextant and chronometer from Jack Wilbur, books and photos and models of spray and Slocum things, and somebody loaned us an antique thickness planer that was run by a Model T engine that we used briefly, and it ended up that Jack Wilbur's hand plane worked better. We had a huge huge bandsaw. I think the Noank foundry cast some of the fittings. Elliot Jocelyn made the original name and hailing port. Nora Andrews helped me sew the cushion covers. Many villagers' dreams sailed as part of Scud with us. The bilge pump from the Berry, wheel from Eleanor Reed Thompson's Eleanor, teak decking from the Annie, the sandbagger, the spar from the old Noank catboat Sweetheart, iron ballast pegs from Joseph Conrad, 12-inch port light from the Latvian refugee ship Gundel that was at the shipyard, a heavy lug sail from the lifeboat of the steamer Exemplar, and the flag from the South African catch, Sandefjord, a John Sutphin 6.5 for a seagull outboard that I pitched over the side of Tonga because I was sick of falling over it. And lots of, thank you. And many, many other things that if I have forgotten, I'm sorry. And I also want to say when we got back, we were welcomed and we were broke. And Jim and Nancy Pratt let us stay in their house for 3 weeks while we fattened up their dog, while he ate Leon's food. And then 6 or 7 or more friends loaned us enough money to put a deposit on a house. And you all know who you are, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Anybody has questions?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
In that whole 5 years that you were gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where would you say the worst place was for like mosquitoes or bugs?
Any place warm.
Okay. I mean, is there a place?
The worst thing I think you can, Molly and Hudson can agree or disagree was in the Marquesas with the no-nos. You know, the sand fleas, because you get bitten by them, and if you scratch them, you'd have an ulcer on your leg right away. You know, that was the worst. I mean, we probably shortened our lives by, I don't know how long, by burning mosquito coils in the cabin, you know, to keep the mosquitoes out of the boat. But usually we're anchored out, so if there was any breeze at all, we were okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mary, when I saw the advertisement for this presentation, I immediately thought of the legendary trip to Nova Scotia. As our family and your family, 2 cars, as I recall, and
2
all
cars.
our kids, and we go off to Lunenburg to get fittings for Scud, the stove, I think,
The stove
and the
fittings,
oars.
and the oars, you know, that's where they came from.
And I remember being in tents and camping and trying to cook chicken on a little grill in a sleet storm.
Oh, probably. I don't remember that, but I would have selective memories.
I still have the white soup plates from the Lunenburg ship's channel. Do you have some of those?
No.
Well, I remember John Sutphin going up. We stayed in the Blue Nose Inn, and you said, "I've got to write a letter on this letterhead and paper." I don't know who wrote it.
I don't even.
And
All I remember was George had 18-foot oars. They had to bring them inside this inn.
yeah. And the kids always wanted to ride in your car because you had ham sandwiches and we had peanut butter.
How did you get through the Panama Canal without an engine?
Okay, we borrowed an outboard, and George put a bracket on the stern, and we had that. I don't know how strong it was, probably 15 or something like that. Then that's how we got through the locks. But it was kind of precarious because we were about ready to give the canal to Panama, so they weren't repairing. The United States government was not repairing the locks. And on some of the down locks, there was a 4-knot current out through the doors, which made it kind of exciting.
Could you say anything about the genesis of the idea? Was it a family decision, and how did you finance the whole thing?
Well, okay, I meant to say that at the beginning, but we started in the middle. We had decided that we liked to travel, and we couldn't afford it. He was a wood carver. And so we were in the Navy, and he got out here. And we had decided we wanted to go around the world. We'd been in Sausalito and saw a Tahiti catch, and they had just been back from the South Seas. Okay, that's where we're going to go. And that was in 1960. So it took us until 1971 to get all the ducks in a row. We decided we were going to do it, I guess, when we got immersed in Noank. Like I said, it was just a wooden boat building cabin. And all the knowledge was here, the expertise was here, the people were still there, Jack and Major Smith. And So we just did it. And I was working at the day for $160 a week. George was a wood carver, and he was doing pretty well at that time. He probably was making as much as I was. And we saved one salary and lived on the other for a year. And then he quit, and I kept working. And it took 18 months to build a boat, to build a hull, to launching. And then then we were done by the spring. But the boat cost $7,000 sail away, counting lumber, sails. I don't remember if that was food, but you saw what was on the table that we loaded, so it wasn't very expensive. It was a frugal enterprise. Let's put it that way. We just decided to go, and we knew long enough, we knew before we had the kids that we were going to do that. So they grew up knowing that that's what we were going to do. You can ask them.
They were brainwashed.
They were brainwashed.